So we've looked at Beowulf as an example of Old English and Anglo-Saxon literature. And we've taken a look at all the characteristics of Old English and some poetic elements as well. But Beowulf is not the only example of Old English and Anglo-Saxon literature. There is a manuscript called the Exeter Book that includes poems and religious scripture and riddles from the time that is basically hailed as the beginnings of medieval and English literature. The Exeter Book includes tales of the times, a time that was filled with hardship and loneliness. People were separated from their loved ones for long periods of time, going off to war, going off on voyages. There were outbreaks of disease and attacks by wildlife or nature. Frequent warfare broke up communities and families. And most commonly, the heads of the households, the men, were separated from their families because of all of these events. So both the men who went off to war and the women who stayed home to take care of the families dealt with severe separation and loneliness. Although the men had their warriors and their companionship and their loyalty, and although the women had their families as companionship and loyalty, they both were very isolated. They had to think about and worry about what the other part of their family was doing and where they were, would they ever see them again? And although they had some loyalty and companionship, by themselves, they were really very lost. So we're going to visit some examples of literature from the Exeter Book and analyze how, even though people can value companionship and loyalty, they can remain very isolated and lonely, and what effects does that loneliness have on their personalities and their characteristics. While you're reading these texts, I want you to remember a time when perhaps you felt lonely and isolated. Perhaps you were separated from your family or friends as a result of a move or even a vacation, or perhaps you simply just felt alone. You could even think about how quarantine or the lockdown situation from COVID-19 could make you feel isolated and separated from the rest of the world. I want you to really consider how you reacted to that isolation and that loneliness. Was it with anger or sadness? What helped you cope with the situation? If you're able to tap into how you reacted with those bouts of isolation and loneliness, then you'll be better able to connect with the narrators in the poem. While we read these poems, we're going to have two main focuses. Our literary analysis focus is on mood, or the feelings that the reader gets while reading. And our poetic focus is on a term called kennings, which was an Anglo-Saxon poetic device. And you're going to analyze both to see how they have an impact on the text. Overall, the goal is going to be to see how the Anglo-Saxon and Old English life and worldview affected people from warriors all the way down to commoners. And we're going to compare and contrast how those worldviews affect all different walks of life. The Old English poems that we're going to be reading have a direct reflection on human life at the time. It really shows the human needs and desires of the Anglo-Saxon people. And in one way or another, each of these poems can reflect the effects of isolation and loneliness on humans.